It's midnight in the Everglades. The humidity clings to your skin like a second layer of sweat, and somewhere beyond the tangled mangroves, something screams. A sound too human to be an animal, too wild to be a man. Thousands of miles north under the pale, endless twilight of an Alaskan summer, a fisherman swears he saw a woman walking barefoot across the ice, her hair white as frost, her eyes black like voids. Both places, impossibly different. One is a swamp teeming with life, the other a frozen silence stretching into eternity. But both, say the old ones, are hiding something. Dark things, ancient things, things that never left. Florida, the sunken gate of spirits. Before Florida was spring break and Disney dreams, it was something older, something sacred. To the Calusa people, called the Shell Indians for their elaborate shell mounds and tools, this peninsula was more than land. It was a gateway, a thin place where spirits slipped through like steam rising off the mangroves. Their shamans, painted with ochre and fishbone needles, whispered of the Ototemen, a creature with no eyes and teeth made of stone, who roamed the wetlands at dusk. When the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, they called it El Silencio, the silence, because no animal would move when it passed. Even today, locals in places like Chokolosky Island claim the air suddenly stills, the birds stop singing, and the insects fall silent, moments before an overwhelming dread washes over them. And then, nothing, no tracks, no wind, just nothing. Alaska, land of ice and forgotten names. Up in the frozen reaches of the Arctic Circle, the Inupiat and Yupik tribes told stories around seal oil lamps, their voices hushed in respect and fear. They spoke of the whale, a creature that lived beneath the ice with translucent skin, and a song that lured children too close to the shore. But there's something far older, far darker, than even the Kalupalik. The elders won't say its name. They refer to it only as the one who waits beneath. In 1899, after a series of disappearances near Name, missionaries documented in journals, now stored at the University of Alaska archives, that entire families fled their villages overnight. The only clue left behind, carvings in the snow, spiraling inward like a great maw. It is not the cold that kills, one note reads. It is the hunger in the silence. Witness testimonies, unsettling events. Testimony, Carla R., Everglades Tour Guide, 2019. I've done night tours for 15 years, seen gators glowing under moonlight, even a panther once. But last summer, something different. We were at Turner River, and the water went dead still. I felt it before I saw it, like pressure on my chest. Then this fog, thick, fast, rolled in, and something moved inside it. Not walking, gliding. Testimony, Joseph E., Alaskan bush pilot, 2021. Flying over Point Hope, early morning, clear sky. I see these footprints, perfect human footprints, in a straight line, across untouched snow. No trail in or out. They ended at a crack in the ice. I radioed it in, but by the time anyone checked, fresh snow had covered everything. I still dream about that line. So straight. Too straight. These aren't isolated accounts. Florida's Collier County Sheriff's Office reported 14 missing persons between 1998 and 2004, all near swamp boundaries. In Alaska, the area between Barrow and Kotzebue is called the Triangle of Silence by locals. Planes vanish. Equipment malfunctions. People walk into the woods and don't come back. The influence of these stories creeps into modern culture like vines reclaiming an old house. Ever notice how horror films set in swamps like Annihilation or The Skeleton Key always portray the landscape as alive, watching? Or how icy horror, The Thing, 30 Days of Night, always includes themes of isolation, madness, and something ancient beneath the ice? That's no accident. In 2020, Netflix quietly consulted with indigenous Alaskan storytellers while developing Hold the Ice, a canceled thriller series where an ancient entity haunts a pipeline crew. The script allegedly included references to The One Who Waits Beneath, but was shelved for being too controversial. Meanwhile, Florida's cryptid scene has exploded on TikTok, where Gen Z creators like Everglade Files post eerie footage of fog beasts and silent gator attacks, followed by static distortion and vanishing sound. It's become trendier than Bigfoot because it feels realer. We've just scratched the surface. Florida and Alaska are more than states, they're thresholds. one drenched in heat and swamp magic, the other frozen and waiting, like a breath held for centuries. What connects these places? Why do both share stories of disappearance, ancient watchers, and places where the world grows thin? And if these legends are real or rooted in something that once was, then what else have we overlooked? What do you think? Are the Everglades hiding a gateway to another realm? Is there truly something beneath the Alaskan ice that never sleeps? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know your theories. And if this story gave you chills, hit that subscribe. We're just getting started. The 1920s brought a new wave of settlers to Florida. Developers carved roads through the Everglades, draining wetlands, cutting into sacred land. What they didn't know, or chose to ignore, was that the Calusa burial grounds were not just ceremonial. They were seals. Some communities warned that disturbing these sites would invite what was buried to rise, not in physical form, but through imbalance. Fishermen in Everglades City reported schools of fish swimming in perfect circles for hours, creating vortices of mud and blood. One hunter vanished in 1926, leaving behind only a rifle and a set of boot prints leading directly into a stagnant pool that hadn't existed the day before. In the frigid expanse of Alaska, the 1930s marked a different kind of intrusion. Prospectors, lured by gold and mineral promises, began dynamiting through ancient glacier walls. Inuit elders warned them to leave certain ice formations untouched, ice that sang in the wind, ice that pulsed under moonlight. A geological survey from 1933 described resonant echoes that responded to human footsteps in the Tanana Valley. The report was shelved, labeled as anomalous data. Shortly afterward, 3 surveyors went missing during a snowstorm that lasted less than 2 hours. Their tents were found collapsed inward, with deep gouges cut into the snow in a radial pattern, as if something had exploded upward from beneath. By the 1950s, tourism boomed in southern Florida. But amid the flashbulbs and orange blossom perfume, locals whispered about a place off Highway 41 called Deadwater Canal. The canal itself was never mapped officially, but those who ventured down it swore by its unnatural silence. A motel owner named Lorraine Beach claimed she lost her husband there in 1957. His boat was found adrift, engine still running, blood smeared along the rim, but no body, no footprints, nothing. The official report blamed alligators, but the bite patterns didn't match. In Barrow, Alaska, a meteorological outpost recorded a brief but intense temperature anomaly in 1961. For precisely 90 seconds, the external sensors dropped to -100 degrees, well below any known regional record, then returned to baseline. The outpost's technician, Paul Hanley, kept a journal describing a tall figure made of frost that stood outside the station during the event, unmoving, watching. He died of exposure a week later, 20 miles from the station, barefoot, with frostbite on his hands, but not on his feet. The snow beneath his body was unmarked, as though he had floated. These incidents, scattered across time and geography, were dismissed by authorities. Yet within both regions, a pattern was forming. The land reacts when disturbed. In Florida, the disturbance bleeds. In Alaska, it freezes time. Dr. Maria Jennings, a folklorist who spent 10 years studying pre-colonial myths of the southeastern U.S., wrote in a private correspondence that Florida is not haunted. It is inhabited by memory itself, layered in wet sediment and still dreaming. Her Alaskan counterpart, anthropologist Elias Kumak, described something similar in his 1982 field notes. There are entities here that do not belong to time. They remember being ignored, buried, silenced. But it's not just old myths. In the 1990s, a classified project known as ECHO was conducted by an unnamed federal agency. Declassified fragments, leaked in 2014, referenced harmonic anomalies detected simultaneously near the Okeechobee Basin and under the Beaufort Sea. The report's final page, heavily redacted, mentioned a term used by both Calusa descendants and Inupiat elders, the mouth without voice. It's not clear whether this was metaphor or literal phenomenon, but the language matches independently across cultures thousands of miles apart with no known contact. Skeptics argue these stories are just that, tales born of isolation, fear, and the human need to explain the unexplained. But those who live in these borderlands where civilization fades into wilderness tell a different story. In Homestead, Florida, a woman named Desiree Clark kept a garden behind her home. In 2003, she reported that her soil began to blacken, plants rotting from the inside out. One night, she heard whispering in a language she didn't recognize. Her dog refused to enter the garden again. A priest blessed the property. The soil remained dead. She moved within the year. In the village of Shaktoolik, Alaska, a man named Alvin Turak disappeared while ice fishing. His son found his sled intact, gear untouched, but the ice beneath had melted into a perfect circle, even though the temperature was -30. Elders took this as a sign. The circle matched an ancient pictograph believed to represent a spirit gate. The boy never spoke again. He still lives there, silent, drawing spirals into the snow with a stick. The terrain shapes the myth, but the core is the same. There are places in America where reality is not stable. In Florida, the heat breeds mirage, and mirage masks truth. In Alaska, the cold preserves secrets, keeping them whole. When you look closely, both environments resist intrusion. They push back, they warn, not with roars or growls, but with absence, silence, stillness, a refusal to explain. Cultural analysts have started tracing the impact of these regional legends on national anxiety. Horror trends have shifted toward ambient dread. Films like The Witch and Hereditary don't rely on jump scares but on unease, presence, suggestion. Screenwriter Lyle Timmons, in a 2021 interview, admitted his film, Hollow Tide, was directly inspired by stories he read while visiting Ochapee, Florida. He claimed that while researching, his phone began recording on its own and captured several minutes of swamp noises, followed by a single phrase whispered in Spanish, "It never sleeps." His recording was lost during editing. Meanwhile, in the gaming world, Alaska has inspired multiple survival horror maps. One developer, under pseudonym, posted online that while mapping tundra assets, he kept seeing figures in the periphery of his screen. The code was clean, no bugs. He eventually deleted the assets. But players of the beta version still claim that in certain corners of the map, under specific conditions, a white silhouette appears and follows silently until the character stops moving. Is it coincidence that both states repel full colonization of their wilderness? That despite modern mapping, there are areas still unexplored, still unphotographed? In 2020, satellite imagery over Big Cypress National Preserve glitched repeatedly over one specific grove, displaying only a black blur. The same year, an Alaskan drone mission over the Bering Strait ended with the drone flying straight upward into the atmosphere until signal loss. The last image, an eye-like shape in the snow below. What is being guarded? Who is the guardian? Historians tend to treat myth as artifact. But maybe these myths are not fossils of belief. They are warnings encoded in story. Dr. Kumak once said that stories are the land's immune system. They rise when we poke too deep, mine too greedily, or forget too completely. In that context, the Calusa legends and Inuit spirits are not separate. They are different dialects of the same scream. And that scream is getting louder. There are projects today, both government and private, aiming to reopen old lands. Florida's swamps are being drained for development once more. Alaska's permafrost is melting, revealing objects long buried, some man-made, some not. In 2023, a pipeline crew near Deadhorse unearthed a stone slab beneath the ice, marked with symbols that no linguistic AI could decode. The slab was quietly removed. A week later, a worker was found catatonic, eyes wide, hands raw from scratching at the ice floor. In the same year, in the Fakahatchee Strand, a team of spelunkers entered a newly discovered sinkhole. Only 2 returned. They refused to speak about what they saw. One reportedly drew a map on his hospital wall, over and over, with his own blood. The map resembled ancient Calusa ritual carvings. He died 3 days later of cardiac arrest. The medical examiner's report noted an unusual formation of scar tissue around his heart in the shape of concentric rings. This is not just folklore anymore. These are patterns. Events echo across centuries, geography and language. The land remembers. The land reacts. We are taught that history is linear, that mythology is metaphor. But what if history loops? What if myth is just the vocabulary we use to describe what logic cannot yet accept? As we continue this journey, ask yourself, if 2 such different regions, separated by culture, climate, and time, tell the same story in different words, What truth lies beneath that repetition? What happened here before the first settlers came? And why does the ground still whisper when no one is listening? In early 1974, a minor archaeologist by the name of Benjamin Lasker received a private grant to investigate strange shell formations near 10,000 Islands off the southwestern coast of Florida. Officially, he was there to catalog evidence of pre-Columbian coastal settlements. What he found was far stranger. Deep within one of the mangrove islands, hidden by layers of foliage and tidal erosion, Lasker uncovered what he believed to be a ceremonial platform, flat, circular, and arranged with coral stones too large for their placement to be accidental. Surrounding the circle were hundreds of shell fragments engraved with symbols that did not match any known Calusa, Timucua, or Seminole script. According to the only surviving letter he wrote to his university contact before vanishing in May of that year, the stones seemed to align with lunar phases and certain points of tidal flux. He called the site the Listening Ring. The platform was later buried by a hurricane, but not before local authorities dismissed Lasker's disappearance as accidental drowning. His body was never recovered, and his last tent, found weeks later, showed no signs of struggle, except for a single clean spiral drawn in charcoal on the inside of the tent wall. On the opposite side of the continent, Alaska faced an unusual winter. In the village of Norvik, elders noticed something uncanny during the long night season. Traditionally, the sky remains pitch black for weeks, broken only by the shimmer of the aurora borealis. But that year, a constant low red glow hovered over the southern horizon, pulsing slightly, like a heartbeat. Hunters refused to go out at night. Children were forbidden from even looking in that direction. One night, a local school teacher broke the rule and ventured onto the ice to photograph the phenomenon. Her camera was later recovered, lens shattered inward. The photos were corrupted, except one, a blurred figure, tall and symmetrical, standing far in the distance, arms outstretched. Her diary, retrieved from her home, ended with a single sentence: "It knows when we remember it." In 1986, a secret meeting was held at the University of South Florida, where a consortium of folklorists, cryptographers, and linguists gathered to compare anomalous symbols discovered across the southeastern U.S. and parts of rural Alaska. The files, leaked in 2011 by a former doctoral student, reveal something disturbing. Identical spiral glyphs, sometimes clockwise, sometimes counterclockwise, were found etched into tree bark in the Everglades and carved into stone near glacial caves in the Brooks Range. No linguistic root could be determined, but when overlaid, the symbols created an interference pattern, a visual resonance that one participant claimed caused nausea and disorientation. Dr. Hal Reyes, a semiotician present at the event, later wrote an unpublished monograph titled Syntax of the Forgotten, in which he theorized the spirals were not a language, but a kind of visual spell, something meant to affect the observer rather than convey meaning. He died in 1990 during a lecture, mid-sentence, collapsing in front of his students. On the whiteboard behind him, drawn hastily in black marker, was a perfect spiral. Meanwhile, in the Florida Panhandle, the small town of Blountstown suffered a series of animal mutilations. Livestock were found bloodless, their bodies perfectly arranged in geometric patterns, often accompanied by scorched earth beneath them. The sheriff at the time, Lyle Mercer, claimed to have seen lights hovering over the fields, slow, deliberate, silent. In a tape recorded the day before his retirement, Mercer whispered that the lights always came from the south, from the wetlands, and that the animals were taken not for blood, but for silence. The tape was confiscated. Mercer disappeared 6 months later during a solo fishing trip. In 1999, on the edges of the Alaskan National Wildlife Refuge, a research outpost monitoring permafrost shifts detected something buried beneath the ice shelf. A hollow, 60 meters across, perfectly spherical, with walls of an unknown metallic compound. The team, led by geologist Samantha Ngo, was told to cease all operations. Satellite coverage was blacked out. Ngo later gave a private interview to an investigative journalist, claiming that during their last scan, a low-frequency hum began to resonate through their equipment, followed by spontaneous power loss. They abandoned the site. 3 months later, the ice above the hollow collapsed. Nothing was recovered. The event was never officially recorded. Patterns began to emerge between the two territories. In both regions, electromagnetic anomalies occurred near natural spirals. Coiled roots in swamp trees, circular ice fractures. Dogs refused to approach these zones. Compasses spun. GPS data vanished. In Florida, rangers reported sudden bursts of intense heat near marshes during cold fronts. In Alaska, the inverse. Intense cold during heat waves. The land, it seemed, was not behaving according to known laws. A researcher from Louisiana, Mallory Chen, traveled to Nome in 2004 to compare Gulf Coast folk songs with indigenous Alaskan chants. Her field notes, discovered posthumously, describe a disturbing similarity in cadence and theme. Both cultures sang of a watcher, a keeper of boundaries, one that lived in the in-between, between land and water, between breath and death, between now and before. She recorded a lullaby in both regions with nearly identical melody lines, the lyrics differing only in geography. In Florida, sleep now, where the moss grows wild. In Alaska, dream now, where the frost walks wide. The recordings were erased during an unexplained data corruption event. But if these entities or phenomena are real, why has no official body acknowledged them? Some believe they have. In 2016, a batch of documents marked Level 3, Behavioral Containment Protocols, was released during a breach in a cloud storage server linked to a private defense contractor. Among pages of technical jargon and heavily censored incident reports were references to geostabilization points and mythogenic zones. One map showed a red-marked corridor beginning in the Everglades and terminating in the Brooks Range of Alaska. The map was labeled Primary Threshold Line. The implications were staggering, that some unseen architecture beneath North America connects these places, and that certain stories arise not from imagination, but from pressure building in forgotten places. In modern times, the influence of these legends persists, but now with a digital face. A popular augmented reality app was pulled from app stores after several users, while playing in remote areas of Florida and Alaska, began receiving messages that did not originate from the game. One user in Juneau reported the screen flashing, "Do not return," in large red letters after scanning a forest location. In the Everglades, another user's device locked up entirely, playing a garbled audio file that, when reversed, contained the phrase, "We wait in the roots." Artists, too, have been drawn to these patterns. A sculptor from Tallahassee, Jonah Baird, began creating large wooden spirals, claiming he dreamt them every night after hiking alone in the wetlands. In 2021, he unveiled a massive installation titled Unseen Hinge. The day after the exhibit opened, the gallery's power grid failed for 3 hours. Surveillance footage captured a dark fog slowly moving through the space, dissipating before reaching the sculpture. No explanation was found. In Alaska, a painter named Irina Selick vanished in 2022 after completing a series called Above the Ice, Beneath the Skin. The final painting, discovered in her locked studio, depicted a giant human figure submerged in snow, its head barely visible, eyes open and glowing. The paint shimmered unnaturally, reacting to light in ways that defied pigment science. Her case remains unsolved. If art reflects the unseen, then perhaps these expressions are not interpretations but translations, warnings, echoes, and still, the land holds its breath. In the spring of 2024, a retired NOAA worker, Alistair Dobbins, released a personal memoir titled Below the Fog Line. Within it, he describes an unauthorized expedition into a restricted zone near Lake Okeechobee. He and 2 colleagues followed a wildlife trail for 2 days, then found themselves on a dry basin surrounded by cypress stumps. In the center, a black stone monolith jutted from the earth. When they approached, Dobbins said, the sound vanished, not quiet, but true absence. His watch stopped. His thoughts scrambled. One colleague collapsed, convulsing. The other began to speak in a voice not his own. They fled. The man who spoke died 3 weeks later. Blood vessels burst in both eyes. Brain lesions unexplainable. In Kotzebue, a similar monolith was reported, only visible during specific moon phases. Locals call it the standing eye. It is said to watch, never blink, never move. No outsider has successfully photographed it. Those who try report hardware failure or physical illness. As these stories accumulate, they form not folklore, but a fractured map, a guide to something buried, ancient, and unforgotten. Perhaps not gods, not monsters, but systems, sentient landforms, conscious weather, intelligence that predates us, that doesn't require form or speech, only pattern. We chase these stories because we need answers, but maybe the answer is this. Some places are not meant to be explained, only respected, only avoided. As we prepare to move deeper into these overlapping geographies of fear and memory, the question shifts. It's no longer what hides the darkest legends. The real question is, what happens when we stop calling them legends? If you've made it this far, you've probably sensed there's something behind the stories we tell. Something that goes beyond scares, beyond mystery. Something that begins to take shape, as if always waiting for someone to listen carefully enough to notice. The legends born among suffocating vines and silent glaciers carry not only the fear of the unknown, but also the insistence of time in repeating its signs. And the closer we get, the more they seem to watch us back. The cultural landscape of the United States has always been shaped by mythologies. Some emerge in big cities and spread through digital forms. Others survive in small villages, whispered from generation to generation. But there is a specific type of legend that refuses to die, even when forgotten. It manifests itself, changes form, infiltrates the arts, the media, and collective behavior. And this is where the connection between the hidden forces of Florida and Alaska begins to invade the present. In 2007, a group of film students at the University of Texas decided to produce a short film set in the Florida swamps. Inspired by oral testimonies from local tour guides and fishermen, they created a narrative about a faceless spirit emerging from the waters during high tide. The short, shot on a shoestring budget, went viral after an alleged incident. The director, after reviewing the final edit, reported hearing voices coming from inside the computer. The team thought it was a prank, but 3 weeks later, the original film file disappeared from all backups, replaced by a mere 7-second video, a motionless figure standing in front of an empty canoe, surrounded by thick fog. The university closed the case without official comment, but the video still circulates on closed forums. Far north in Anchorage, an independent theater company staged a play called Waiting Between the Ice in 2012. The play was based on indigenous stories about ancestral presences living beneath the ice sheets, awakened only when their names are spoken. The play provoked unexpected reactions in the audience, fainting, panic attacks, and feelings of collective vertigo. The director, in a later interview, stated that the effects were intentional, the result of the sound design. But a former sound technician revealed that during rehearsals, they began picking up unplanned interference in the microphones, a low, pulsating noise, similar to deep breathing. After the season ended, the equipment was replaced, and the sound files were lost in an unexplained glitch in the editing system. These phenomena aren't limited to the performing arts. Themed festivals have multiplied in recent years, attracting curious visitors to places considered cursed or charged with unknown energies. In Immokalee, inland Florida, the Low Mist Festival has been held annually since 2018, where visitors walk along lantern-marked trails while listening to recordings of local legends, such as the Mangrove Shadow Man and the Saltpeter Lady. Although promoted as a tourist and cultural experience, the festival has had 3 incidents in which participants became lost in the woods, even with experienced guides. 2 were found hours later, disoriented, with their skin covered in a slime-like substance. The 3rd was never found. In Alaska, something similar is happening with the so-called silent deer, a modern legend that has gained traction among teenagers. The figure is said to be an animal with human eyes that walks on 2 legs on clear nights. The myth spread on social media and spawned the unofficial Listening Night event, where young people camp in forests near Fairbanks and try to capture sounds the deer supposedly emits, an imitation of familiar voices in distorted tones. Local police have intervened on several of these nights, following reports of screams, panicked runs, and in one 2020 case, the temporary disappearance of a group of 3 friends, found after 2 days without remembering how they got to a distant clearing. These stories' reflections also appear in mainstream cultural production. Episodes of series like True Detective, Dark Winds, and The Outsider incorporated elements that directly reference these regional narratives. The humid, muggy landscapes of the south are often associated with entities that feed on memory, while the icy north becomes the ideal stage for ancestral forces, sleeping beneath the ice, awakening when forgotten. An HBO screenwriter, speaking anonymously, reported that during the filming of a police series set in Alaska, part of the crew began dreaming of a structure made of bones beneath a frozen mountain. The dreams were repeated, even among members who didn't communicate with each other. Why do these stories keep coming up? What is it about them that inspires both fear and fascination? Some scholars argue that the answer lies in the soil, both literal and symbolic. Florida, formed by sedimentary deposits rich in marine fossils and organic remains, is considered by geologists to be one of the most unstable terrains in the United States. Sinks appear out of nowhere. The earth gives way. Matter decomposes slowly, but never completely. This creates an environment where the physical past remains present, even if invisible. Alaska, with its millennia-old permafrost, preserves entire traces of unknown times. Extinct animals are found nearly intact. Ancient bacteria remain alive. In both cases, time behaves differently than it does elsewhere. This anomaly of geological time seems to be reflected in the psyche of local populations. In interviews conducted by ethnographers from the University of Oregon, residents of both southern Florida and villages in northern Alaska reported recurring dreams of spirals, doors leading nowhere, and eyes floating in the darkness. Interestingly, these accounts maintain similarities, even in communities without direct cultural contact or exchange. Dark tourism naturally capitalizes on these narratives. Tours to the Black Swamp in Florida City promise guided paranormal experiences. Some include EVP, electronic voice ghost, recording sessions and simulations of ancient rituals. Guides wear clothing inspired by Calusa costumes and often reenact supposed rites of passage. Critics denounce cultural appropriation, but organizers claim they are merely reproducing historical records to keep memory alive. Some tourists report unexpected effects: prolonged insomnia, nightmares about creatures made of water and shadow, and a feeling of being watched upon returning home. In Alaska, more discreet agencies offer extreme isolation trips, with campsites near areas of unsolved disappearances. One package includes an overnight stay in cabins near Teshekpuk Lake, a region marked by stories of a sound that walks across the ice. The strangest reports came from a 2023 expedition, when all electronic devices failed simultaneously for 4 hours. During this time, travelers reported hearing footsteps on the roofs of their cabins, even though the roof was covered in untouched snow. Upon returning, some developed temporary hearing impairments, hearing rhythmic buzzing sounds whenever they approached icy surfaces. It is at this point that we invite you to reflect. What do you make of these connections between such opposite extremes? Is there an unconscious collective force shaping these stories? Or is there actually something beneath the earth, beneath the ice, beneath the swamp, waiting? We want to know what you think. Which part of these narratives did you find most disturbing? Which one felt most real? Share your impressions. Your perspective is an essential part of this journey. And if you haven't joined us yet, sign up. We're just getting started. This is an invitation to traverse not just myths, but the spaces where reality and imagination meet, collide, and create something new. Because the next layers are deeper, and the Earth has not yet revealed everything it holds. In mid-2010, a rusty metal box was discovered during civilian excavations in a remote area of Big Cypress National Preserve in South Florida. Buried more than 2 meters underground and wrapped in partially fossilized ceremonial textiles, the object contained typewritten documents in English dated between 1943 and 1949. The papers, though damaged by moisture, directly referenced an operation called Project Dark Necklace, allegedly coordinated by a now-defunct military intelligence cell. The contents suggested that the U.S. government had identified non-linear convergence points in specific regions of the country. Among the most frequently cited coordinates were the center of Lake Okeechobee and an area north of Nome, Alaska. This location correspondence rekindled theories about a possible underground energy network, or even non-human communication. The documents also mentioned the collection of vibrationally active artifacts retrieved from the bottom of natural wells and difficult-to-access caves. One of these objects, classified as a Type D nodule, reportedly emitted frequencies audible only to certain members of the field team. None of these individuals would survive more than 3 months after direct contact with the material. Simultaneously, in Alaska, unofficial reports from the 1950s recorded similar operations. In 1952, a mission led by Air Force technicians and contracted anthropologists accessed a fissure near the crater of Mount Veniaminoff. The report, preserved incompletely in the archives of the University of Fairbanks, indicates the discovery of an underground chamber lined with an opaque mineral of unknown origin that absorbed artificial light without reflecting any light. One of the team members, linguist Edward Mallis, reportedly attempted to decipher symbols carved into the chamber floor, declaring that the writing resembled a pre-Sanskrit language, but with symmetry patterns impossible to replicate with known tools. In the following months, reports of disappearances and psychological